Let's just pray. Lord, thank you that our hope is all in you. We put hope in all kinds of different things in our life, but we totally get the picture of Christmas and what you've done for us. And we know that, Lord, our hope can be and should be in you. And so, God, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you. I think that duct tape's the best part. Have you ever tried that? Like, I can't get the zipper closed, let's just duct tape the thing shut. You know, we all pack our lives a bit tight. And one of the things that we do most often is we travel very heavy. We travel with a full set of luggage in this one area that I want to talk about this morning. Most people carry around a heavy load of bitterness. Bitterness. I won't ask for a raise of hands, but I would suggest that probably most of us today have some form of bitterness in our lives. Bitterness is just, I have a bitter taste in my mouth toward someone or something. It's that when they're in the room, they bother you. When they're around, it's annoying. It's just a problem. It's that when they get invited to the party that you want to go to, you know that they will be there, and so therefore you say, I'm too busy. I'm not going to make that party. It's that when they are blessed, you're angry, annoyed, irritated. When you know you could draw in closer to that person, you withhold. You push back. You kind of have an arm's length view of that person. That you'll allow them so far in, but you hold them here in bitterness. Listen, I could be talking to married couples that have been married for 50 years that have had a wall of bitterness up for decades. I could be talking to a 17-year-old that can't stand being at home. And they've got a wall of bitterness up with their parents because their parents, for whatever reason, drive them crazy. It's all over the place. It's at work. It's at home, in our community. It's especially in holiday season. Holiday season is let's get together with family. When most of your family you like, but some of them you just, they're going to be there. I was hoping they wouldn't be there this year. You know, maybe that's the case with a lot of us. And I would love to say that I have conquered bitterness, and bitterness is not a temptation for me. But I'm a fellow struggler. Here is a kind of a main point, an overarching point that I want you to kind of grab onto this morning. You can't control their actions, but you can control your reactions. How many control freaks do we have out there? Come on, there's more of you. I know you. We're friends. I've seen you in action. We're all a little bit of control freaks, aren't we? And here's the thing, it's a control issue. You can't control their actions. Some of you really need to say this. Go ahead, say it with me. You can't control their actions. You can control your reactions. Listen, we need to get this whole control thing turned around. Often with bitterness, the reality is we look at what they are doing and say, if they would not have done this, I wouldn't have this pain to deal with. This wouldn't be in front of me. This wouldn't be my life. You can't control their actions. You can, however, control your reactions. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 is a key text within this. I'm going to look at three different texts. This is the first of three. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15. The author in Hebrews is this. The whole chapter in 12 is an amazing chapter, but I just want to look at one verse, kind of pull it out for our benefit this morning. It says this, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. What does that mean? Grace is necessary in order to have a relationship with God. Grace says, I've blown it, I've made a mistake, my actions, if you will, my actions were wrong toward God. And so in order to have a relationship with God, grace had to be part of that. Ephesians chapter 2, Paul says, for by grace are you saved. Grace is a necessity between people and God. It's that there's a reality that we've all done something wrong. I've messed up, you've messed up, and the necessity is for grace to be established in order to have a relationship with God. It sounds small, but it's actually huge. Think about how massive that is, that God knows everything that I've done wrong. And what God's done is God says, I'm pouring out my grace to you. That we can't earn a relationship back. Have you ever had somebody try to do that? I mean, they really burned you bad, and then they try to earn themselves back into good graces with you by doing all kinds of nice things for you. It doesn't undo the thing that they burned you with over here, though. It's just nice things over here to try to placate your frustration and anger with them. With God, it essentially is no different. God says, here's my grace I'm pouring out to you. You can do all kinds of nice things, but the only way you'll get back into good graces is to accept my grace in your life by faith. Accept what God has done for us through Jesus Christ. That he's paid for all of our sins. All of those things are wiped away by what Jesus has done. So he says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. Listen, don't fail to obtain, don't fail to realize that the grace of God is a massive part of our lives. We can't go through a day without God's grace. Think about it. Now, here's how we measure this, though. You ever do this? Like inches versus miles. If you go for a jog, which is easier, to go for a jog inches or go for a jog miles? Inches, right? Okay, we get that. So we measure ourselves and what we've done wrong in inches versus miles. We look at others and say, oh man, they're miles away from God because they've really done some bad things. I'm inches. Here's the reality. The reality is, no matter what you've done, we're all miles, right? No one's inches. We want to view ourselves as inches, but that's not reality. He says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. When we keep in mind the grace of God, that in order to have a relationship with God, grace has to be established, that we've all messed up that bad. He says then this, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. When you keep in mind the grace from God to us, then he says, here's the second aspect, that no root of bitterness springs up. A root of bitterness, I can't be bitter against God because God cannot do anything bad to me. God doesn't sin against me. But other people sin against me. Other people mess up and do horrible things to me. Right? I mean, you've all experienced this. Just driving, you'll find that people mess up and there's issues there. There's all kinds of things. If you're in a relationship for any length of time, you'll find that the other person messes up and hurts you and does something wrong. Bitterness is simply saying, I refuse to extend grace to you. I refuse to allow this relationship to be reconciled fully. And here's the trick we play. We say, I'll allow this relationship to be reconciled up unto this point only. That's not full grace. That's bitterness. He says, don't let a root of bitterness spring up and cause trouble. And by it, many, he says, become defiled. Bitterness is realizing that they've messed up and refuse to extend grace to them. Here, let's look at bitterness a little bit. Bitterness, in this text and others, bitterness plants a destructive root. It's kind of like a cancerous root, if you will. Bitterness plants this destructive root where it's this seed that gets sown down into our heart. It looks all cute and cuddly and nice and friendly and happy and good. And it's like, oh, it's just a little bit of bitterness. I deserve this. I'm entitled to this. Do you know what they did? I mean, if anybody did this, you'd be this and you would want that. And that's where bitterness begins. It's this destructive root. It looks harmless, but what happens is it destroys everything in its sight. Everything around it gets destroyed. Do you realize that bitterness destroys joy? Do you know why you get old and grumpy? A lot of times it's because you live in bitterness. You're bitter because life didn't turn out the way you wanted. You're bitter because they treat you the way that you didn't want to be treated. You're bitter because this experience and that experience. That happens from teenagers into 20s, 30s, 40s, and on. Bitterness has this huge root where it dives into your heart and soul and it begins to destroy everything around. It destroys your joy. It destroys your trust. I hear people say all the time, and you might have said the same thing, I can't trust anyone. Time out. What you're telling me is you had 2 or 3 people that really hurt you deeply, and because 2 or 3 people hurt you deeply, you now trust no one of the 7 billion plus people on this planet. Lovely. That's bitterness. It destroys trust. It destroys relationships. It destroys even your future. It convinces you, it's this deceitful kind of thing that dives into your heart and convinces you to think differently, in that what you do is you begin to protect yourself from future pain. What you do in bitterness is you say, yep, they hurt me, and so therefore I'm holding them out here. They hurt me bad, I'm holding them way out there. I'll avoid them no matter what it costs. Even if I have to miss that party or miss that gathering or miss this part of my life, I don't care what it takes. I will protect myself. And so what we do is we carry around this huge weight of protecting myself. It's like that kid, what's that crazy TV or that Christmas movie? It's a Christmas Story. It's just this weird old movie where this kid gets dressed up in this snowsuit, and he's like this, right? I wouldn't encourage you to watch it because it's just not that great a movie. But anyway, now you're going to get bitter against me for saying that. I know. So anyway, you can pray for me. But that's what bitterness looks like. Bitterness looks like I've wrapped myself and I've wrapped myself and I've got so much wrappings around me. You can't hurt me. And we walk around like this, all stiff. Bitterness, it has a destructive root. You constantly say I won't let this happen again. It makes you feel like you now have taken control of them. But listen to me, the way it really is they are scot-free and you're sitting there with 25 layers on you, walking around with weight that you were never intended to walk around with. Bitterness plants a destructive root. It's deceitful. It's malevolent in the way that it just zeroes in on your heart and life. And then bitterness produces a poisonous fruit. A poisonous fruit. In this, the end of the verse here, that no root of bitterness, it springs up, it causes trouble, and that's that destructive root. And by it, many become defiled, or another word for defiled is poisonous. It defiles, it poisons you. Bitterness, it brings this poisonous fruit all around you. It defiles you. It poisons your past, and it poisons your future relationships. A person that's filled with bitterness is a person that's very hard to have a relationship with. They hold everyone at arm's length. They're not vulnerable. They're not open. They're only open to a certain length, and they are very closed off. Bitterness, it literally poisons the way you treat people. So, how do you kill? How do you get rid of? How do you let go of bitterness is the question. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 and 32 says it this way. He says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice." He says this bitterness thing, this is a problem, and it's associated then with wrath and anger and clamor and slander. Let it be put away from you. Let go of bitterness. And the verse before that, he says, don't grieve the Holy Spirit of God. And so there's a relationship with God that's tied to this bitterness aspect as well. How do you let go of it? Verse 32 is the follow-up to both of those verses, where Paul says, don't do this. And I love what Paul does. He does this all the time. Don't do this over here. And that's great to do. That's a great guilt trip kind of a message. But Paul does the next step. He says, but do this instead. Here's where your hope is. Here's how you'll be blessed. Here's how you let go of it. He says this, and be kind. Be kind. Kill it with kindness, I'll say. Be kind to one another. Tender-hearted. Kill it with tender-hearted, or kill it with compassion. Forgiving then. Forgiving one another. As God in Christ has forgiven you. To kill it with kindness is to be very simply, it's just to do good to the other people. That's like kindness doesn't have another word to really describe it. It's just, you're just kind. You're just being nice. They're there in your presence and you're just being kind to them. But they really burned you. They hurt you bad. You don't understand what they did to you. I know I don't. That's not the point that I can say, oh, I know everything and I've been through a worse situation than you. I can guarantee the worst person ever has somebody that had something worse happen to them over here. And it's all in relation to how you process things anyway. Be kind. How do you let go of bitterness? It starts by killing them with kindness. By killing not them, by the way. You're killing it, the bitterness. You're beginning to look at the bitterness and you're saying, I'm not letting you take my life. I'm going to be kind to them. I'm going to be good to them. When they're around me, I'm going to say hi to them. When they're with me, I'll shake their hand if that's appropriate or whatever it is. I will have a conversation even though they hurt me deeply. Now, in this, there's this little bubble. What do you do with people that continue to hurt you? We'll call them toxic people. Toxic people need a lot of extra grace. But that doesn't mean that you allow them to continue to beat you up all the time. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom. There's wisdom in saying a toxic person continues to just beat me up and beat me up and beat me up, and they're beating me down, and they say all this garbage about me and stuff, and do all kinds of lousy things. Okay, that's a situation where you say, okay, I'm going to pour grace into their life, and I'm going to be wise in how I deal with them, and that I cannot allow that to destroy me. And so I separate myself in a wise way from that. That often or almost always comes with confrontation too. That you say to that person, you are toxic in how you're handling and treating me. This relationship is going in a bad way. I cannot do this. It's not healthy, and I can't live this way, and so I need to remove myself from this as long as you're going to be this way. Do you see the distinction? That's Ephesians, by the way. In the beginning of Ephesians, he says in verse 15, speak the truth in love. So I'm speaking the truth in love. And so there's the beginning. And then the end is be kind to them. So I'm going to be kind no matter what, and I'm going to continue to do good. So I'm going to kill bitterness with kindness. The second thing, I'm going to kill it with compassion. Kill it with compassion. This is to be tender-hearted. This is to be strong-boweled is the literal Greek word when you go and do it. And I love to do this illustration with 14-year-olds. And like, this is a great junior high illustration. I'll do it for you because some 90-year-olds still love this. But strong-boweled is literally, I'm keeping my guts strong. It's like when you've had too much chili and you've had too much pizza, and inside you've got all kinds of gas, and you hadn't had gas X before you had that, and you're trying to hold in what would be offensive to those around you, right? Okay? Those that like the junior high sense of humor, you're with me, and everybody else is like, really, Pastor? You're so undignified? I was a youth pastor before. You don't understand. But that's what it is. I'm holding in what would be offensive to you. And I'm going to keep it to myself, or I'm going to use it at an appropriate time and an appropriate place, is the reality. That's tender-hearted. That while I feel like I need to be able to say more to you, I need to put you in your place. You don't know what harm you did to me. You don't know how bad you've made my life because of what you did to me. That's the tender-hearted, the strong bout. I'm going to hold that in. Is that easy? Whew. In my experience, it's not that easy. But that's the word. I'm holding it in. I'm strong-boweled. And then the last thing, kill it with forgiveness. I'm killing bitterness off with forgiveness. To forgive is to choose not to remember. Remember, this whole idea of forgiving and forgetting is not a biblical thing. When God forgives us, does God say, I'm forgiving you? Oh, I forgot all about that. Can God forget? No, that's not what happens. God, as it says in several different texts, God chooses to not remember it anymore, to not bring it back up and hold it over our head. While it's there now, he speaks at that. Even when Satan brings it up as an accusation, God speaks at it and says, that's forgiven, that's done with, that's over, that's in the past. I'm no longer holding this over their head. That's true forgiveness. I'm choosing not to remember this anymore. And listen, for some, this is a very complex conversation because of what you've dealt with in some horrific ways. So I don't want to oversimplify it in a 35-minute message and say, if you just do these 3 things, you'll be fine. And later on this afternoon, you're over all of the things that I don't want to oversimplify it. Sometimes it takes like a longer process of working through these things to get to a point where you're able to forgive in this kind of a way. But it takes starting to go there. So we kill it with forgiveness, where you choose not to remember. You choose not to hold it over their head any longer. So my question this morning is, are you killing it, or is it killing you? Are you killing bitterness off in your life, or is bitterness killing you? Because last I checked, you and I are going to experience offensive and painful things from other people on a daily basis. Would you agree? Whether it's at home or at work or in the community, at the grocery store, in your car, no matter where it is, you and I are going to deal with this on a daily basis. That at the time where you're sitting in the car and no one's around, what's ruminating in your mind is the question. Is it, man, this person, they are really getting on my nerves, and you're having a full-out conversation while no one's around with this person and how angry you are, and you're just letting them have it in a sense, and that becomes your way of life. Bitterness, it needs to be dealt with in that we leave it go, we let it go, because in the end it will kill us. Some, as I've observed and read and kind of researched this a bit, some let it poison us. Some of you, maybe you'll let it poison you. Here's how poison works in that. You isolate yourself from true relationships. It's not that you're not with people. It's that you'll say hi and you go to this level, but you don't go to a vulnerability level. an openness level. You don't go there, and so you kind of hide and you isolate, and you're fun to be around to that level, but not to the caring and vulnerability aspect. You've allowed bitterness to poison you. I don't trust, so therefore I won't. Well, that's not where God wants you. Or here's the other thing. We become workaholics. This is another form of isolation. It's that we work. I mean, in the book of Song of Solomon, the couple was having some marital issues. She rejected him, and here's what he did. He went to work and stayed there. He let it literally not reconcilable, so I'm just going to be a workaholic instead of trying to figure out ways to work and navigate through and remaining open and being kind and tender-hearted and forgiving. So let's go back to our first point. You can't control what? Their actions. You can control your reactions. Let me go through quickly a family that was defined by bitterness. Now, some of you, this will be very familiar to you, and others, this will be brand new. But it's in Genesis chapter 37. I'm going to quickly go through this. Genesis chapter 37. And it's a long text from Genesis 37 over to Genesis chapter 50. It carries with it a time frame of about 13 to 15 years, and then some, really. But in Genesis chapter 37, here's just simply a family that's, I would say, is defined by bitterness. It says, Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, the land of Canaan. Jacob, by the way, his name was changed to Israel, and that's where we get the Israelites, or the Jewish people, from. They came out of Jacob, and that's all of his kids, grandkids, and such. So that's Jacob. It says, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph being 17 years old. Who's 17? Gabe's 17, okay? So Joseph is Gabe's age, all right? Think about that. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing a flock with his brothers, so he's out in the field there with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. So the brothers aren't doing so good. Older brothers, by the way. Joseph is the second to last. So he brings a bad report of the brothers to his father. And now Israel, Jacob, he loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. So he brings him back. And they've just got this awesome relationship. There's a great relationship of trust. And Joseph comes back and says, man, they're not doing so good over here. They're not being responsible. I don't like hanging out with them. Dad, I just really would rather be with you. Whatever the conversation goes. And Jacob goes and makes this coat of many colors for Joseph. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, could not speak peacefully to him. Here's the reality of the first part of the family. We often gloss over this and we look at Joseph's response, but let me look at the brothers. The brothers are victims of their father loving the one brother over them. For whatever reason, they find themselves as a victim of, I'm not loved as much, he loves him more, and there's some history behind all of that, which doesn't really matter. But there they are, sitting in this kind of position of, oh, we're second-rate kids. How does that feel, to feel like you're not loved by your dad? Maybe dad didn't say, I love you to them. Maybe dad wasn't so nice to them. Maybe dad wasn't so engaged in a relationship with them. I mean, I know people all the time that the way that they're raised by their dad or their mom, there's just this ache inside that they say, you know, dad never loved me, never said he loved me. He wasn't so nice. He was always gruff and always kind of lecturing, and that's all I knew of dad. And it leaves this hole in your life. And I would look at these guys and say, that could be them. I mean, it seems pretty clear that there was a break in how dad looked at them. So they're dealing with bitterness. So they take that root of bitterness, they allow it to grow, it's festering in their heart, they're talking about it, they've all formed a common enemy. The common enemy is Joseph. They hated Joseph. They didn't want to be around Joseph. When he was around, it's like, oh, let's get out of here, and they kept pushing him away. Their life, I would say, was defined by their bitterness with Joseph. Not just here, but you read all the way through and you look at their stories and you just see that this has serious or significant effects on their life all the way through to the end. So when Joseph was blessed by his father and was the favorite, they hated him. And you go down further and Joseph has dreams, and he goes to his brothers and he says, hey, listen, I had this dream, great dream. You guys bow down to me. My whole family does. And I mean, how do you respond to that if you hate him? It says they hated him even more. So Joseph is called to go out on this assignment by his dad, to go check on his brothers. He goes out to where they are. They see him coming. How do they respond? They hate him that much more. They want to kill him. It's not like we're irritated, annoyed with you. I'm going to unfriend you on social media. No, they wanted to kill him. And so they make plans to do that. They, as a group of people together, allowed bitterness to grow in such a way that they decided that there has to be a way to get rid of him out of our lives. And so they do. Instead of killing them, they sell him into slavery. He ends up going to Egypt as a slave. It's not the end of the story. We'll pick them up at the very end. But here's the reality. The brothers were getting killed by bitterness. Bitterness dove into their heart, and they allowed it just to grow up and grow up and grow up, and it overtook them. And they made decisions that affected their lives in such huge ways. They made a decision that would break their relationship with their father permanently. And they made a decision that would affect them emotionally, I would say, for the rest of their lives. Joseph, the victim of the brothers then, where they sell him into slavery, favored by the father, great, but now he's a slave in Egypt. And in Egypt, to be a slave, you can do whatever you want to the slave, and that's just how it went. And then he's offered, Potiphar's wife. He's there and kind of excels in his position to be like the chief of police, is like top person in charge. And then Potiphar's wife goes and tries to seduce him. He refuses her, and then in refusing her, he gets thrown into jail because she lies about him. He gets thrown into jail, and the whole idea then is Joseph's now gone. Just forget about Joseph. Like, his life is a waste. He's there in jail for years. Listen, it'd be one thing if you're there in jail for a couple days, but he's there in jail for years. And he's doing his best, gets promoted in jail to be, one of the tops in jail or whatever. And he's doing his best there where he's helping people out, and people have these dreams, and he's interpreting these dreams, and he's totally forgotten about. Until years later, say about 13 years later, Pharaoh has this dream. And he needs somebody to interpret. And one of the guys that was in jail with him remembers, hey, this guy knows how to interpret this dream. Why don't you call him up? And so they pull him out of jail. He's been there for years, forgotten about. They pulled him out of jail, and now he goes to Pharaoh, and he's got to interpret the dream. He interprets the dream, and Pharaoh looks with him with tremendous respect and says, you're promoted to being right under me. You're like in charge of everything. So he goes from here to being over here. Now, here's the summary point of all of this. When you get to chapter 50, you see how he responded, how Joseph responded to his brothers. Joseph had no opportunity to be with his brothers for 13 or so years. Now when he finally gets to be with his brothers, at the end of all of this, he's there with them, and there's some things that happen in providing for his family in famine, and he does some interesting things there that is highly debatable and how that all worked out, and there's some things there. But you get to chapter 50, when finally his father dies, is years later, and now his brothers fear for their lives. They come up to him in chapter 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him. They recognize they did wrong. Like, they get it. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Did he do this? Probably not. To say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of your servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, and here's the important part. I'm going to pull everything together right here. Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about this many people that should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Time out. Could you just do this in real time? Think about this. Joseph can have them killed. Right? And in real time, they come up and they say this, please forgive us. Here's the interesting thing. When you look at Joseph's life, he had already expressed forgiveness in how he treated them. Do you remember the 3 things we talked about earlier? How do you kill bitterness? Joseph was doing that. He was killing it with kindness. He provided for them. He provided for them food upon food upon food. When everybody was struggling to have food in the famine, he's providing for his family. He provides for them to such a degree that he says, why don't you leave where you are, come to where I am. I'll set up a whole place for you. You can eat from the king's table, basically. He killed them with kindness. Like, he was not interested in staying bitter. He was interested in having a relationship with them. Tender-hearted. Do you see what happens when they come up to him? Joseph wept when they spoke to him. He's filled with, like, his inside is exploding. Wouldn't you, I mean, if you were Joseph, wouldn't you honestly be like, man, you don't know what you did to me. You don't know what jail was like. Do you know what it's like to be a slave in this place? Do you know what it's like to be in jail? It wasn't for a week or a month or a year. Decade. Wouldn't you want to express that? You want me to forgive you? Do you know how many times I got beat? Do you know how often it was that I didn't go didn't have food? Almost died. You would think that his life stunk. Not a little awful. It was horrible. I would think that he would want to express all of those things, but instead he was tender-hearted and compassionate. He held it in. He wept in front of them because he wanted that relationship, and he had long since forgiven them and was willing to have this gracious and reconciled relationship. It was extended. They were asking for forgiveness. And note here, the brothers were so filled with bitterness that they could not see. They could not see the kindness, the tenderheartedness, and the forgiveness that was being offered to them all along. Do you see it? And I love what Joseph does. He says, what you meant was evil, God meant it for good. He had this awesome thing. So maybe you're in the middle of this. It's to kind of bring it to conclusion. Maybe you're in the middle of this big thing where you are being treated like garbage by somebody else. You're in the middle of bitterness and anger and frustration, and you're like, I want to get rid of this, and so I'm going to kill it with kindness and kill it with compassion and forgiveness. And let me give you the hope for the future. Because this is so cool. God does this. God often uses pain to bring promotion into our life. Pain often leads to promotion. Do you get it? That's where Joseph is. He just simply says, listen, pain brought promotion. This was good. It was painful. Yes, truth. I hated it. But pain brought promotion. Here's 2 ways. Pain brought promotion into his life in a job sense, that he was able to be fully utilized in the gifts and abilities that God had placed in his life, in a way that he didn't go to school for or anything like that. I mean, he didn't go to school. He was 17 he was in jail. but he was able to be utilized with the gifts and abilities that God had given to him to be second in command in Egypt and to provide for the world at that time. That's a promotion that God does. That's a rags to riches kind of a thing. Pain often leads to promotion. That he had this huge promotion that he had in mind for Joseph. So, you know what we should say? Somebody that they caused all kinds of harm and pain for us, we should say in our mind, hey, thanks for that. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Like, just be real for a second, right? Hey, thanks for firing me. I'm so glad you did that. If you wouldn't have fired me, I wouldn't have got this job over here that I get paid twice as much. They like me better, and I like my job way better, you know? Hey, thanks so much for breaking up with me. That was really hard and horrific. I'm so glad because who I have now, woo, they are really awesome, you know? Okay, so I'm just being a little bit facetious and having fun, but do you get it? Pain often brings promotion. Second part of this promotion. As Joseph walked through this, here's what we see. He kept depending on God. It says, and God's grace, and God's grace, and God's grace kept leading him along. And in order for him to function in the way that he did in jail, or in Potiphar's house, or in Pharaoh's house, you had to look and say, this was not training. This is God and his imprint on your life. You don't have God's imprint on your life when you're not having a relationship with God. And so we look and say, okay, this pain promoted a deeper relationship with God. Please don't discount a relationship with God. If Joseph gave me a call, said, hey, Pastor Bill, while he's in jail, and I was like the chaplain for the jail. He said, hey, can you help me out with this? Not knowing the end. And we were to sit down and we were saying, I had this dream. Things were going to turn out different. I don't get what's going on. And I mean, I love God. I want to serve him. And I did with Potiphar, and I end up in jail. They lied about me. I'm forgotten about. Pastor, can you please help me understand? What do I do with this pain? I would say, well, God's got a plan for it. And if you're sitting in the pain, you're looking at me like, typical pastor answer. Hey, come on, really? God's got a plan for my pain. Come on, give me something real. Joseph, that's what I got, man. So second, Joseph, God's got a plan for your pain. So Joseph, pull into where God is. Like, just depend on his grace. I know it's painful, bud, but in this, you will have a deeper walk with God than you could have ever had if you did not go through the pain. So pull in. Lean in on God. Let go of the bitterness. It's not going to do you any good. It will destroy your relationship with God, and it will poison your relationships with people. If you were Joseph at that point, you'd be like, yeah, I'm not scheduling a second appointment with that pastor. But because of Joseph's life, I can now walk us through and say, look what God did. That's historical fact, not fiction. Look what God did. And look what God can do in us. Then in the midst of our pain, in the midst of the seed of bitterness that wants to get sown down deep into our heart, we have the opportunity to say, no, I'm traveling light today. I'm letting go of bitterness. I'm going to kill bitterness with kindness. I'm going to kill bitterness with tenderheartedness. I'm killing bitterness with forgiveness. I'm not going down that path because it will poison me. And it will poison everything that God wants for me. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for your grace. Lord, every single one of us are miles away from where you are because we've done so much wrong. But Lord, by your grace, you pull us into a real relationship with you. So Lord, teach us your ways. Help us to learn about you. Help us to follow you. Lord, I pray for some that maybe today or this week or this month or this just in their life, this bitterness is such a huge element, huge struggle. Lord, would you give them the grace to walk with you? Give them the people to help them through some of the pain, so they know how to let go of bitterness over time. Lord, we want to give you the praise for what you can and what you will do. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.